First question goes to the governor's proposed budget moves about $102 million of your DCNR appropriations offline to the Environmental Stewardship Fund, Keystone Fund, and the Oil and Gas Lease Fund. Kind of makes it look like the appropriation will see a decrease of about 30.5%, but I think in actuality some of those lines end up being an increase of about 9.2% increase roughly. Just curious if the agency supports this plan.
Yes, as you know, every budget's a different budget. The governor proposed a no tax increase budget, which I noticed in the governor's budget address was applauded all around. So in every budget, the budget secretary's got to find a way to make ends meet. It's a common thing in DCNR's budget to have oil and gas lease fund underlie our general operating budget. We've seen that over the years since about 2011. This is the first time the Keystone Fund has underlied our budget and the Environmental Stewardship Fund. So those transfers were made to give us a whole operating budget, as you mentioned. It gives us the ability to perform our mission, and we are committed to meeting the requirements in the program level that the Keystone Fund, Environmental Stewardship Fund have provided in the past historically.
So that's you support the governor's initiative in this?
That's correct.
Okay. About 2 years ago, I read this to the DP, had a similar press release about September 8th, 2017. The agency sent out a press release. DCNR alerts lawmakers that rating funds threaten state and local park contracts-related jobs. Quote, claims that cuts to dedicated funds would not impact programs or jobs are inaccurate. Removing money from these special dedicated funds would mean postponing and canceling projects to help Pennsylvania communities and public lands without the use of general operating dollars. Quote, Dunn wrote. Dunn noted that they had asked the House Republicans would have learned that the $145 million they identify was available and already contractually committed to hundreds of projects and communities across Pennsylvania and to address more than $800 million in projects on public lands. Quote, the money that is in the Keystone Environmental Stewardship Funds need to remain because DCNR has committed it through contracts to projects and communities. It needs to be financially responsible to make good on those promises, Dunn wrote. Quote, the new money coming in will support our grant and infrastructure projects next year, or these popular programs will be eliminated. There's nothing reserved that has not been committed to a grantee or a contractor. With the loss of the Keystone Environmental Stewardship Funds, DCNR would not be able to contract with private industry for infrastructure projects in state parks and forests. The engineering and construction industry in Pennsylvania would certainly feel the loss from not having the infusion of millions of dollars into the economy for these construction projects. Final part, over the past 5 years, DCNR has invested more than $90 million in Keystone funding, much of it through private sector jobs to rehabilitate and repair state park and forest infrastructure based on priorities such as health, safety, natural resource, open space protection, and conservation. What is the difference between now and then? What are you seeing in these funds where all this freed up money is now able to come over to the budget?
So I wouldn't call it freed up money. So what I said at that time is true today. When we make a grant on the Keystone Fund or make a commitment to a park or forest infrastructure project, that money is tagged for that project, and then that money sits in the SAP system for that year for that project. Two things happened this year that are different. Number one, the Keystone Fund this year came in very healthy at $83.7 million. Last year was about $60 million. Keystone Fund is really transfer tax based. It's very sensitive to the economy. For every real estate transfer done, there's a percent tax.
Well, I get the transfers in. My question is, the argument 2 years ago, these funds are committed. When projects come in, you commit the funds. There is no excess dollars. Are you not seeing the amount of projects coming in? Are you not committing them?
Yeah, but the number of projects coming in is still very high. We're able to say yes to about half of the grants. And as you all probably know, we have a severe backlog on our park and forest infrastructure program. But what we're doing is committing future years to the same level of funding of these projects. So one way we can do that is to look at a project and estimate its time to completion, and then project the funds like make that commitment, but tag the funds to the year that they'll be called upon. So a lot of our grants.
So you're actually able to maneuver funds to move money to the General Assembly, but maintain commitments within the fund. So why couldn't you do that last year? What was the difference, or 2 years ago? What was the difference between 2 years ago and this year? Why couldn't you do that 2 years ago?
Well, the expectation of the communities and the ability, the commitment we made, it was matched by the commitment they made. So when they got that grant, they knew the money was sitting there.
I'm still not following how there were any changes between 2 years ago and this year ago, and this year. I mean, the only difference is the governor said he wants to use the money this year.
Right. Well, and this is the governor's budget. Every year's a different year. With no new tax budget, with rising costs of.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not here opposing it. I'm just curious. We were told many times by your office and you yourself that we can't touch these funds, and now we can. And I'm not hearing any difference between last year and this year on how we're able to actually use these funds. I'm just looking for clarification within these funds to be able to say, yes, we can, or no, we can't.
So what I'm saying is we've had additional Keystone funds come in, and we are, with the money we have this year, it's a new budget year, we will then tag the funds, appropriate the funds in the year we expect them to be spent. Now, since that hearing 2 years ago, our grantees and our way of handling projects, we paid attention and looked at the issue you raised, and a lot of our communities are requesting 90% upfront payment. And the thing about the Keystone Fund, it requires that any interest gained on Keystone money be used for the project. So one reason that a lot of the communities were spreading out, taking the payments over 3 years, was they didn't want to be responsible for managing and putting in escrow those funds. So now, this year, we'll explain that to the communities. If you want to take 90% up front, then you've got to escrow that fund and make sure that. So in other words, we have to operationally do it different. And you were asking us to do that on the fly last time, and we have to set the expectation in our contracts with the community.